Okay, Saturday, 27th of July, 2024. So, sharing smart stuff men should know. Psychology Saturday. Understand yourself and others better. Now, crossing the road dilemma. To cross the road or not? To jaywalk or not? So this is an interesting phenomena that I saw when I went to Germany in August 2011, where crossing the road was quite strict. You had to wait for the green man, otherwise you get fined. But as a practical matter, I'd be standing on the curb, looking left, looking right, no cars. As a practical matter, taking it as it is, face value. No cars, therefore safe. Therefore, no problems, cross the road. But culturally, you couldn't do that. You had to wait for the green man. Fair enough. Okay. I say fair enough because now the rules are defined. The rules of the game are defined, there's more clarity. So we can't just cross the road. Fast forward December 2022, I go to Poland, and then afterwards I go to Budapest. Warsaw, Poland, then Budapest, Hungary. The exact same scenario. You have to wait. You can't just cross the road when you want. No jaywalking, otherwise you get fined. You can't just cross. No, look left, no car. Look right, no car. Now, so what? So there's a few interesting things about this. One interesting kind of way to analyze that, psychologically speaking, is maybe it's the prisoners being the jailer, the prisoners, so to speak, the general public, enforcing the rules on themselves. Because practically speaking, you're standing on the curb, no cars. So and there's no one around. Maybe it's 1 a.m, maybe it's 1 p.m, maybe in the village, middle of nowhere, countryside, no cars. Practically speaking, what's stopping you from just crossing the road? Nothing. It's all in here. And you could argue maybe it's in here and here as well, but mainly it's here. No car. So there's no one there, no people either, no pedestrians. So practically, what's stopping you? Maybe it's the prisoners enforcing the rules on themselves. The prisoners are the jailers, you could say. Now that's interesting, because that delves into the idea of, as in a sense of society doesn't need to have so much policing and so much control, because through the inertia and the decades of these strict rules and whatever else, people have just taught to enforce the rules themselves. There's this interesting concept in psychology called social learning theory. And that talks about how there's a room of monkeys and some bananas on top of a ladder. And whenever a monkey tries to climb up the ladder to get the bananas, cold water sprayed on them. And then they all retreat back on the ground and they beat the one that caused the water to splash, come onto them. Classic conditioning, really. And over time, more monkeys try, always get the same thing. Wet, cold, horrible. And over time, they replace the monkeys. And other monkeys come that have not experienced the cold. And they try as well, and they get beaten up. And over time, they replace all the monkeys. And in the end, none of the monkeys, because they're conditioned, because they may have never been hit by the water, but they got beaten because of the classical conditioning to say, if they do this, they get beaten. So eventually, none of the monkeys ever try to reach for the bananas, top of the ladder. Social learning theory. Basically, monkey see, monkey do over generations in time and decades and centuries even. So in that situation, the monkeys didn't try. The exact same situation could be said for crossing the road. Okay, what's stopping you practically crossing the road? Like with the monkeys, what's practically stopping them from getting the banana, even though the water could be turned off? It's possible. How likely? Different question. But as a practical matter, it's possible. So, cross the road. Well, what's stopping you? Here. Maybe it's in here. Maybe you could argue heart and soul as well, but less likely. But here, quite likely. It's the same analogy when you see those horses. I guess horses or elephants, where they're tied to a plastic chair, basically an outdoor chair, but they're not moving. They could very easily tug away and drag that chair, but they're stopped. Something's stopping them in here from doing that physically and mentally. So that's one way of analysing it. Maybe you could argue that there's a premise, there's a hypothesis to say, well, to not jaywalk when you practically, as a practical matter, you could. No one here, middle of nowhere, or 1 o'clock in the morning. What's the problem? Okay, that's one way. So therefore, society is the jailer as well. You're enforcing these rules on yourself. And then you could say, well, if that's the case with the road, expand that logic and say, where else is that exact same psychology being applied in society, in your mind, in life, in business, in your approach to money, approach to life, approach to relationships, approach to studying and learning? When you apply that logic, what's holding me back mentally, if not just myself, with crossing the road or getting the banana or pulling that plastic chair, then what else is stopping me mentally? What else am I stopping myself or limiting myself in that same context? However, there's another way of looking at it completely, and this is more of a libertarian law kind of way of looking at it. You could say that, interestingly, that traffic light, that green man, that red man, acts as a kind of third-party arbiter, someone to enforce the rules that both parties, the pedestrian, a slightly different angle, a slightly different approach, that the pedestrian and the drivers both agree to. They both concede their decision-making to the traffic light. So then we say, right, well, if they are both conceding their decision-making to the traffic light, if something happens, a dispute, they both agree to say, right, referring to the third party, the traffic light, to say, well, who's in the wrong? Because that way then you could argue that in terms of law, in terms of insurance, we have a clearer view as to who is right, who is wrong. Interesting. It's a third-party arbiter, someone they both agree to follow the decision and rules. If there's a red light, that person stays, that person goes. If it's red for them, therefore it's green for them. Therefore, they have priority on the road. And if there's a problem, a crash, insurance claim, you name it, both parties can look at the third-party thing, the traffic light, and say, right, that's the decision. That's what happened. That is what happened. That is the scenario. And then decisions based on that. I forgot the word now exactly. The proceedings, the decisions based on that. But that's an interesting law way of looking at it in terms of arbitration, decision making, conflict resolution. And that's interesting because then that also kind of implies, and this is what I've also noticed subtly in another country, in Bulgaria really, and I guess you could apply this to the rest of Eastern Europe and possibly other places in the world, where some places would overcompensate with bureaucracy and rules to try and compensate for past inefficiencies or past failings or past clarity, you could say, or lack of clarity, where they have too many rules to try and compensate for lost time and inefficiencies in the past. Example, having these strict rules to say you can't cross the road unless there's a green man. Fair enough. That's one way of looking at it. Third-party arbiter. That way we have clear decision and clear ruling. That's the word looking for. Clear ruling as to who's right, who's wrong. Very possible. But that's a little more of a libertarian kind of angle and way of looking at it, in a sense of, you could say it's for law and dispute resolution, but it's still quite valid. But both of these points of views are stuff that I've noticed and saw. Because when I was in Poland, I noticed you couldn't really cross the road. Practically speaking, you could. No cars. Oh, they're in the distance, far away. There's no one here, no one there, no police. You can't get a fine, materially speaking. What's stopping you? Nothing. Practically nothing. Just go for it. But if there is a problem, if there is a dispute, car crash, hit by a car, how can you say who's in the right, who's in the wrong? Now then you could try and reconcile the two of them, square that circle and say, right, well, forget about it, jaywalk if you want, don't worry about crossing the road when there's no cars there, just cross, and then the insurance companies will find other ways, and court proceedings, whatever else, will find other ways to solve that problem. Videos, whatever, I don't know, all sorts of other ways, all sorts of techniques I'm sure there are, apart from using a third party to arbitrate who's right, who's wrong, i.e. a green light, i.e. a sign, give way, stop, you name it, yield, whatever else. But that's interesting psychology right there. What is holding you back? Is it just in your mind? Is it just in your head? Is it something physical? Is it something mental? What's holding you back? If that traffic light is holding you back from, say, crossing the road and the rules, when practically there's no one there to enforce the rules, what's holding you back? That logic can be applied universally in ways that right now we can't even imagine, we can't even fathom, we can't even enumerate that principle. What's holding you back? That's psychology. Again, Psychology Saturday. What's holding you back? Very important, very interesting. But yes, That's an interesting observation I noticed. First in Germany, and then it was reinforced in Poland and Hungary. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, subscribe for more. Sharing smart stuff, men should know. Psychology Saturday. But otherwise, you will see me tomorrow.